Good morning and welcome to AMA Puget Sound's Coffee Talk series live on alternating Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Our guest today is the one and only Mr. Stan Phelps. Hello, Stan.
Hi.
Hello from the East Coast. I'm West Coast. How's it going?
How do you do the West Coast?
I don't remember.
Know. Yeah.
Not since the
I'm not
90s.
Cool enough to do that.
Me neither. But so how is it on your side of the country? It's kind of warm here, surprisingly.
We're trading places. If it's warm by you, it's been raining all day today.
Okay. Any flooding? Are you okay?
Yeah, we pretty much the Ida kind of skirted the western part of North Carolina. I'm in Raleigh, which is the middle part of the state.
Okay. So you're a little more inbound. That's good. Stay safe, everyone. That's all I can say. So we're not here to talk about the weather. As I've said many times, we're here to talk about some goldfish. And why are we talking about goldfish and marketing? If you don't know Stan Phelps, then this is kind of weird to you. So let's kind of I'm aware, and I don't know if you can see behind me, but right here on my bookshelf, I've got gold and diamond right
goldfish. There. Yeah, wow, and gold. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, because it's kind of far away. But yeah, so for those of you for people who aren't familiar with you, why are we talking about goldfish? What is this?
Yeah. So goldfish is just a metaphor for growth through differentiation.
Okay.
And so I'll try to do it really quickly, but the average size goldfish is the size of your thumb, about 3 to 3.5 inches.
Right.
Whereas the largest goldfish in the world is like 20 inches.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about that for a second. That's like 6 times average.
Mm-hmm.
That would be like, walking out of your house or apartment, right, and bumping into somebody who's like 3 stories tall.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out for a goldfish, there's 5 reasons why they grow, and those same 5 reasons apply to everyone who's listening right now.
Okay. And what are they?
Yeah, so really quickly, the first one most people have heard of, it's the size of the bowl or the pond that the goldfish is in. And we're all marketers, right? So that's simply a metaphor for, in business, that's the market that you serve, right? The bigger the market, the more you can grow. The second, for a goldfish, their growth is also impacted by the amount of other goldfish in the bowl or the pond. So in business, who are the other goldfish? They're your competition.
Yeah, exactly.
And this one's an inverse one, right? So the less competition you have, the more you typically would grow. The third one used to be always the toughest till 18 months ago. And so for a goldfish, their growth is also determined by the quality of their surroundings, the water that they're in, right? So the clearer the water, the more nutrients in the water, the more they grow, right? And so that's simply a metaphor for that kind of thinking macro for the economy.
Right.
Your growth is impacted by, regulations, tariffs, global pandemics, right? Supply chain. Yeah, boom. You owe me a beer there.
You're right.
So far we've had the size of the bowl, which is the market. The other goldfish are your competitors. The surrounding environment is the economy. The fourth thing, if you're a goldfish, is that they're really tiny when they're born. How they do in the first 4 months of life will determine ultimately how big they get. And a baby goldfish is called a fry, like as in small fry.
Now you owe me a beer.
What are you called in business when you're just starting out? You're a startup, right? How you do for that critical first 4 months will determine a lot of times how big you ultimately get. Right. Same thing if you launch a new product or service. How it does right in the beginning is key. So the fifth thing, and this is where the rubber kind of meets the road, is if you're a goldfish, your growth is also determined by your genetic makeup. So how strong your genes are, right? But more importantly, how you're separated from everyone else. And the stronger your genes are, and the more that you're separated, typically the bigger you grow. If your genes are weak, right, and you're like everyone else, the harder it's going to be to grow.
Right.
And the takeaway from the entire metaphor is this, is, you know, assuming you've already been in business for more than 4 months, which 98% of the people listening to this have already been around, what's the only thing you have control over? You really don't have control over the market. You certainly don't have control over your competition. No one has control over the economy, right? The only thing you have control over is essentially your genetic makeup, or what makes you different from everyone else. And the idea is that it's hard to differentiate just on your product or your service. It's more about the experience that you build around that.
Exactly.
And what I believed is that marketing was too much about the prospect and getting people into the funnel. And I thought marketing should be as much about, that's important, right? But it also should be about the experience, that when someone's buying and using your product or service, that's the most important part of marketing.
Absolutely.
And that led me, a couple of things led me on this journey that started about 12 years ago.
Wow. 12 years. And how many books?
Like 17.
Wow. And they're fantastic. Like I said, I've got 2 of them, but you hit the nail, right? You've hit it. Like, I mean, I've already heard all of this, but I'm like, yes.
Yeah, so this is kind of a smattering of it, but there's 10 different colors in the series. And when I started, Julie, I thought it was just going to be the one. But kind of my insights and discoveries led me to number 2, and then to number 3, and then I couldn't stop.
Right. And purple actually has 3 different versions. Correct?
So purple, I that was the first book that I did what was called the service edition. So that's, you know, hotels, restaurants, airlines. And then I did a version that is the franchise edition. I tended to do a lot of work with franchises. And then, and so then there's a nonprofit for one of the colors. There's a promo edition. And we've now, purple was the original one. It came out in 2012. We actually did the 2.0 of that, came out in 2019. So updated it, and in fact, speaking of AMA, Russ Klein did the foreword for this.
Okay.
Which was amazing. Yeah.
Cool. That's 12 years. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, 12 years is kind of when I had something happen to me. I was an agency marketer, and I had something to happen to me that kind of changed kind of a paradigm for me. And it led me to start to look for companies that did little things to elevate the experience. And then I was still working a full-time job. So that took about a little over 2 years for it to become the first book in the series.
So that's a good lesson to anybody who's looking at moving their side hustle into their full-time. It's not immediate. It takes time. You have to grow it. You have to put in the time, the energy in order for it to be successful, so you can leave your job.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, it's for those of us that have kind of done that before, you can't just leave your job. But so the 10th book, The Silver, kind of talking about how you started doing the Goldfish series in the first place. Let's talk about along the way. And with the Silver book, which is, remind me the title. I'm quizzing you.
So I got it here. So it's called Loud and Clear: the 10 keys to delivering memorable business presentations.
Right. And
So
because you are a certified speaker, how does that connect? How did that come together?
Well, I think no one is born a speaker. No one is born speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And certainly no one is a naturally born presenter, right? It's a skill that you acquire. And so, when I started down this path just less than 10 years ago, I ended up working with a coach.
Okay.
And so my coach, Alan Hoffler, he's forgotten more about speaking than I know. And so we got together just over a year ago and came out with the 10th color, because here's the thing. You finish a presentation, let's say it's a sales pitch or a company update, whatever the presentation is, and like you get off the stage or you finish and like people are patting you on the back and you're like, oh, I succeeded, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, you really haven't succeeded, because unless people can actually remember the message in their language, if they understand how it applies to them, and here's the kicker, they know what to do next as a result of that presentation. If those things don't happen, you've bought into a myth. And the biggest myth is actually thinking that you've actually communicated something.
Interesting. That's really interesting to look at it that way. It's not something I had thought about before.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I think it's one of the biggest skills that we can work on in our personally and within our careers. That is a huge differentiator. And again, no one's born a natural presenter. In fact, the greatest common fear among human beings is speaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what number 2 is?
Spiders?
Dying.
Really?
Dying.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
Wow. I'd rather speak.
Yeah, well, Jerry Seinfeld does an entire bit on this. He goes, that's crazy. That means if you go to a funeral, that more people would rather be in the casket than doing the eulogy.
Yeah. That's really fascinating.
And here's the thing. I mean, the challenge is that our brain is still very primitive. And the reason why people fear it is because our brain cannot differentiate a threat to our life to an actual threat to just our identity, right? So we start to go into fight or flight type of response.
Yep.
And nobody's ever died giving a presentation, right? But everyone is always, if you don't have nerves, you probably don't have a pulse, right? Before you speak.
Right. Fun story. I don't know how many people know this, and I find it interesting. It's a Wisconsin historical fact, so I love it because I'm from Wisconsin. Teddy Roosevelt, he was campaigning. He was at the back of a train giving a speech. Somebody shot him. It hit him. His written speech was right there. He was hit.
Kept going, right?
He kept going for 90 minutes because he had he knew, like, okay, this isn't going to hurt me that much. But yeah, he just kept going, and nope, that's determination. I mean, I don't know if I could do that per se. That's a big commitment to just keep going. So, if you haven't been shot at stage, I guess you're fine.
Right. Well, I'll give you another one. I just wrote about this the other day. So FDR was famous for saying, there's only 3 things you need to do when you deliver a speech. Be clear, be brief, be seated.
He had a sense of humor.
Yeah, so the metaphor we talk about, like the 10 keys in silver, it's based on kind of the metaphor there. My dad was in a thing called the Signal Corps in the military.
Okay.
And the Signal Corps is the group that works through all the branches for communication. And my dad went in 1947, so he got stationed in Hawaii. He worked in radio communication. And so when you were always communicating across the radio, you're always gauging the signal. And so you would measure two things: the strength of the signal and the clarity of the signal. And it was on a 1 to 5 scale. So if it was perfect, they would say you're coming across 5 by 5, which is shorthand for loud and clear. And we believe that that's the metaphor that you need to, when you speak, loud is not about volume. Loud is being able to engage and rise above distraction, because especially virtually, there's a lot of distractions. I can tell you I have like 20 different tabs open right now, right? And so not only do you have to rise above distraction, you also have to organize your message in a way that it's like very clear and to the point. And so we looked into kind of through everything that we could think of. We collected over 200 kind of best practices or tips, and we included the top 64, but within the 10 areas, 5 being loud and 5 being clear.
Absolutely. Well, that's I don't have words for that, basically, because I'm not a speechless person typically, but it makes sense. It just makes it like when you are speaking, and that's something that I'm working with my kids. They're 11 and a half, so they're starting to get into that teenage, oh, what's up, what's happening? It's like, I don't know what you're saying to me. Please enunciate. And that's what we're trying to teach him. And he's going into drama right now, so that's actually a good thing. He'll be able to speak. But I think you are absolutely right. We need to be working on that at a very, very, very early level, better communication skills. And if we had better communication skills, we would avoid so many issues. So,
yeah,
read his book.
Absolutely.
Moving on from the silver, you did something fun this summer. You went on tour, a little tour.
I went on tour. Yeah, we had the update. So this is Pink 2.0. So my co-author David Rendell and I, we got in the car. And over the course of 33 days, we did 11,000 miles.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I tell people, Julie, you're out on the West Coast. We started obviously East Coast. We made our way all the way out to the West Coast. We kind of did a whole kind of loop around the country. But I tell people, if you ever think about getting in a car and driving cross country, here's my advice. Start with a small country. We live in a massive country. All right. Yes. It's not Russia or Canada, but it's darn close.
It is. It is. Yep. We moved
so
2,000
maybe go to like Luxembourg or something and practice up.
Or start with a state.
Texas is no help. We entered Texas on I-10 at exit 887. Think about that for a second. Going 60 miles per hour, you'd have to drive 14 miles to get across, 14 hours just to get across the state.
That's unbelievable to me. When we moved from Wisconsin to Washington, we drove. Husband in the van with all the stuff and the dog, and me with the 2 4-year-olds. We did it 7 years ago. But yeah, it's a beautiful country. We live in a very beautiful country. It's different, but yeah, it's big. 2,000 miles. So I can't imagine the 11,000. I watched your whole journey on Twitter and LinkedIn. It looked awesome. It really did. And it seems like it went swimmingly.
Swimmingly. It was it was tremendous. I feel like to honor the book, we need to go with Pink in the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was an amazing experience. This is the fourth time that I've done kind of a tour, but this is by far the longest that
Okay.
I've done, and it was just great to be in front of audiences again. And we did some of the AMA chapters where it was the first time that they've had, people in a room
Mm.
in person in like 15 months.
Yep.
So that was cool. Unfortunately, towards like the end, kind of Delta was coming in, but we made it through.
You did,
Yeah.
and thank goodness you got to. That was awesome. I was very happy. I'm sorry that we weren't part of it. We're still in the holding pattern of we're not comfortable yet having in person, and it's probably
and
going to be
that was, you're not alone. That was something that we saw, especially out west.
Yeah.
While we were in California, they were the first state to bring back the mask mandate, and so we were in LA, literally the first day of it. But you're not alone, and it makes it makes sense to be, to not take chances. I live in the South. The South tends to have, where I live, it's still there's a lot of mandates still, but typically the South tends to be a little bit more open than what we found in the West.
Yeah, we're scared up here. We're a little more scared. We're not afraid of rain. Rain is no big deal, but ooh. Right. It's but
I'm a marketer. A lot of my books kind of travel across different topics, like silver is communication, and green is about employees, and blue is about technology, and red's about this I'm so proud of, because it really gets back to brand strategy and positioning. And Pink is based on the idea that your flaws are actually the things that make you awesome.
Yay.
And so it's a little bit of a challenging concept to some people, because they think, well, if we need to be like everyone else in our industry, right? And we need to emulate whoever the leader is within our industry. Not if you want to stand out and be different.
Right. Not among a group of creative people. We're kind of built different. So, I mean, if that's true, then I'm like one of the most awesome people ever. And I'm aware of it. No, with creative people, that's because I think whenever we do try to duplicate what somebody else is doing, it doesn't go right. And then we're like, why did we even do that? It's fine to take elements like, hey, I like what this campaign did. You can take little bits and pieces, but to copy the whole thing, none of us can do that at all. But I want to hear more about this book. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's a great marketing author. His name's Joseph Jaffe. I don't know if you ever heard of Joe Jaffe.
A little bit. Mm-hmm.
He has a great saying. He says, once is witty, twice is shitty.
I've heard that one. My grandpa used to say it.
So what we found is, all of my books, I've now, throughout all of the books, looked now at over 5,000 case studies.
Mm-hmm.
So for Pink, it's now over 350 that we looked at, of brands that have achieved that competitive separation.
Mm-hmm.
And what we tried to do is try to see where, how do they do that? How do they actually stand out? And it turns out that there's really only two ways that you can differentiate.
How's that?
One is to embrace what makes you unique and different, and I would call imperfect, right?
Okay.
Flawed in some way. Like brands that truly embrace that and do more of it, right? Not only embrace it, but like truly appreciate it and then double and triple down on it. And then the second way is a little counterintuitive. It's a less strategy. And so what some brands do is they look at what everyone else does as normal, and they decide to purposely pull back and withhold in some areas. Right?
Okay. All right. I
Um,
like
and,
that.
and they stand out not by doing more, but by actually physically doing less of what everyone else does as normal.
Right. And then people notice, hey, they didn't do that thing that everybody else is doing. Why didn't they do that? Did they forget? Or do they know something we don't? That's what
Right.
I
And
see.
I'm a big believer, and there's a great Harvard Business School professor named Frances Fry, and she wrote a great book called Uncommon Service. And I love this, and it's very much Pink Goldfish-esque strategy. She says, find out what your customers value the most, right? What do they value the most? And be amazing at that. And then she goes, but you can't be great at everything. She goes, find out what doesn't matter, right? Because you can't be all things to all people. For the ones that you value the most, find out also what doesn't matter to them, and then be unapologetically awful at those things. Free up resources to be great at what your customers value the most.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. If you're not giving your customers what they need, then you don't have those customers anymore. It's that give them a pickle
Yeah,
idea.
give them a pay. I love that. That's a great one for people. Tell the story of that, because that's people might not
Yeah,
know
we
that.
I brought this up before, and I can't remember with whom I was speaking. But it was Brian Rutberg, I believe. We were talking about this, and we were talking about customer service and if your customers love you. And the story is there was a restaurant, and I can't remember where it was. The owner, he would train his staff that if a customer, not so much that the customer is always right, but basically whatever small, if it's a small little request that your customer has, go ahead and give it to them. It's fine. If they want an extra pickle for, they had 3 pickles on their burger, but they want a 4th one, give them that extra pickle. What does it
Right.
matter? They're going to be happy.
Don't
It
charge
needs to
them
be
the 25 cents, or
exactly,
that's stupid, right? Just give them the
exactly.
pickle.
Yep, because they'll come back and bring more money.
Yeah, and that's at the heart. I mean, how the concept that I initially began to write about, and I crowdsourced 1,000 examples, and the reason why the colors have come in. The first 3 colors were purple, green, and gold, which are the
Mm-hmm.
colors of Mardi Gras, because there's a concept that comes from New Orleans called lagniappe.
Mm-hmm.
And lagniappe is the idea of a little something extra.
Yep.
And so it was the idea that as we think about the experience that we provide, is how can we do little signature things that make us different, right?
Mm-hmm.
That honor the relationship we have with the customer. But here's the key from a marketing perspective, also give them a reason to talk about that experience.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Again, you always have me speechless because I've read your books and everything. So I'm already like, I already know all this stuff, but I still love hearing it. And
Right.
yeah. I know we're running out of time, but I want to learn a little more about Pink 2.0 and what's different in that one. I know you said there are more stories, more case studies, but what's a little different and compared to the original?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So the main, when we came out with it, we looked across, in the beginning it was about 250 different case studies. We came up, it was 7 different ways. And Flawsome, which is the concept that your flaws are actually the things that make you awesome. It's also the acronym that drove the 7 types. So flaunting, lopsiding, antagonizing, withholding, swerving, opposing, and a thing we call micro weirding, like little things you do, kind of like purple goldfish. But what we found is that there's an eighth category that we call exposing. And exposing is about being radically transparent, like owning even the negative stuff that gets said about you. And so we've got a ton of great examples. So that's new.
Okay.
We upgraded all of the case studies in the entire book. And then we have like a how-to chapter. And before we had the 4 A's, which is awareness. You have to understand what makes you different. And then appreciate. You have to like acknowledge and like accept those flaws. The third is what we call align. So making sure like your website, your brochures, your office represents that uniqueness. And then the fourth A was what we called amplify.
Okay.
And amplify is either a maximize strategy or a minimize strategy. So what do you need to do more of? What do you need to do less of? And so in the new book, we've now expanded it to 6 A's. And the 6 A's are now augmenting. And augmenting is the idea you can layer multiple strategies. And what we found is the best organizations don't just do one thing. They do a variety of things. And then the final A is what we call attack.
Okay.
And attack is interesting. We talk about awareness. What you realize when you read the book, and you might remember this, is that every weakness has a corresponding strength, right? It's a perception thing. So instead of trying to cover up what makes us weak, we have to understand what actually makes us strong as part of it, and not try to cover it up, but to actually illuminate that and be better at that instead of trying to change it or fix it, right?
Exactly.
Well, the converse applies with whoever the leader is that you compete against, because their strength also has what? Has a weakness attached to it.
Exactly.
So you can actually attack their weakness, right, as a way to differentiate what you do. And a great because that's a hard concept. A great example of that, Yahoo used to be the biggest search engine.
Yes.
And if you're old like we are, Julie, right? Early 90s of getting on the Yahoo had like this crazy homepage that had like everything you would possibly need and like 150 places to click. And so how do you compete against that if you're another search engine? Well, you don't put 200 buttons on there.
50.
Google attacked their strength and realized that's cluttered, right? I just want to figure out what I need when I go and search. And so what did they do? Just a plain little box with 2 buttons under it. One which was, I feel lucky, right? I'm feeling lucky.
I still have not used that button ever.
I don't know why what that does.
It's ridiculous.
And so that's a great example of, again, you have to realize, look, don't try to emulate whoever the leader is. Figure out, potentially how to attack where they're strong.
Exactly, because you're still trying to make your customers happy, and you're trying to make those other customers happy to come to you. So differentiation is huge.
Yeah, and here's one thing that we talk about, which I think marketers sometimes lose sight of. We understand this. Sometimes we get so focused on the target, right, that we don't realize that there's an opportunity with people that are in our anti-target market, that if we actually repel some of those people, what does that do to the ones that you actually want? It actually attracts them to you. So we think antagonizing, don't do it to be a jerk. But if there's some things that make you different, don't be apologetic about it.
Right.
If people complain, and one of the fun examples is this movie chain called the Alamo Drafthouse, they got this nasty voicemail from this customer who got thrown out because she was talking and texting during a movie, and that they warn you, but after they warn you, they toss you.
Okay.
And they didn't call her back. They called their lawyers instead, and they said, "Can we use this?" And it took them a minute. They're like, she knew she was being recorded. And so they made it now into a PSA that they play before the movies. They put it on their blog. It went viral. It got picked up by like major news outlets. They got over 5 million views on YouTube. And here's the thing. Even if that didn't happen, that customer is telling, she's telling her girlfriends the next weekend, and half of her girlfriends are going, "What was the name of that place again? Because I think I'd want to go to a place where people aren't talking and texting, right?
Exactly. She did them a huge favor. I've seen one, and I know we've gone over time, but I've seen one in particular for a restaurant where somebody left a 1-star review saying it was like the worst food they'd ever had. They embraced it and they used it as part of their advertising and made fun of it.
Come try what Julie described as the worst tasting coffee on earth.
Exactly. Judge for yourself.
One of our favorite new examples in the book comes from the West Coast, from Utah. Okay. And from Snowbird, which is a mountain resort outside of Salt Lake City. Okay. And it's literally like a cliff on the side of the mountain. And a lot of people gave them like 1-star reviews. And they did an entire campaign, Julie, where all they did was show like beautiful imagery of the mountain and the entire 1-star review. Yep. Like, too much powder was one of the 1-star.
I'm not a skier, but
I don't think you could give those advanced skiers a snorkel. There is never too much powder, right?
That's what I thought.
Another one was like, no easy runs. I felt like my life was in danger.
Ooh, the risk takers.
Well, that's why a lot of people, especially advanced skiers, go skiing, right? Because they want that challenge. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of exposing is that radical transparency of not being afraid to do that.
And I think those customers were really mad that Helen Reddy just wasn't there.
Exactly.
Before we end, because again, I knew we were going to go over, and that's totally fine if that's fine with you. But we've talked about colors, all the colors in the rainbow. But what is your favorite color?
What's my favorite color?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. You know, I love pink. Because again, I'm a marketer at heart, and it's all about strategy, and it's a book about differentiation that's very different in its approach. So I love that. But I would say, you know, this is what kind of started me down the road. And I was so glad when we updated it. I partnered up with Evan Carroll, who's a former AMA leader like us. And, you know, I'm really proud of purple. And if it wasn't for purple, the rest of the colors wouldn't have existed. So we got to give it up for purple.
Some sentimental value. I love it. I'm going to send you a link later. There's a song called Start Wearing Purple by Gogo Bordello. Start wearing purple. I love it. I'll post that later. But like I said, we went way over time, and I love it. I'm not complaining.
We call that lopsiding.
There we go.
We lopsided this.
It's okay. It's fine. With my kids, that's fine. It's fine. But I do want to thank you so much for your time. You're later in the day than I am, so I still have the rest of my day. But I want to thank you because I know your time is precious and you've got a whole bunch of speeches to do and whatnot. So we're really appreciative of you.
It was my honor, and I look forward to the ability at some point to get out to AMA Puget Sound.
Yes.
So we'll make it happen.
Exactly. For some reference, Stan and I have been talking about this for years, about him coming to Seattle area to do a speech. But again, coronavirus hit, and during his pink tour, otherwise you would have been out here. And that just stinks. But we've wanted to have you out here. And you and I have not actually seen each other in 2.5 years.
Yeah, been a while.
It was Summit 19. American Market Association hosts an annual 3-day event for chapter leaders, and that's the last time we saw each other, was the last one in person. So
in Chicago,
yeah, it'd be great this year. I doubt it. It'll be virtual.
Fingers crossed, fingers and toes.
I hope so. But Stan, thank you so much, everyone. His links are down below in the description. Get his books. I do recommend it because you will not be bored. You will learn something, and you will be entertained, and you will be inspired. So his links are down below. If you liked today's episode, please hit the like button and subscribe. We are very close to 100 subscribers. Once we hit that, I can finally customize that URL. So please, we need 20 more. Thank you. Everyone else, have a wonderful day. Bye.